the Batman 2 is bad. Do I have your attention? Good. We as Batman fans are at an impasse. Culturally, communally, we are at an impasse. So much has been made since the first Batman hit our screens all the way back in 1943. Only 4 years after the creation of the character. Yet we still keep trying to bring this character to life on the big screen. And again, we find ourselves walking into the same corner and asking ourselves, is this who Batman is? Now, that's not the question that the producers are asking. What question is that, you ask? Well, the cynic in me has a very simple, direct answer. And yes, in many cases, that is very, very true. I mean, just look at the cycle we find ourselves in when it comes to Batman cinema. We have Batman the movie starring Adam West and Burt Ward. It's silly, it's goofy, and it's full of color. Now, it didn't really matter how this movie did because it's an extension of the show, but once the show ran itself into the ground, that meant there was very little chance Hollywood would be interested in Batman again. Or is it? The 60s Batman show, despised it may be by certain sectors of the Dark Knight fanbase, saved Batman. Hate to break it to Chuck Dixon, but Adam West, Burt Ward, and the rest of the gang did not ruin Batman. Batmania is what made Batman a household character. It's what made him a pop icon. Plain and simple. But, and it's a big but, oh no, not that one, Joel. But TV can only take you so far.
Theory will get you only so far.
What The Dark Knight really needs is a big story, a big director, a big Batman for the big screen.
For those of you out there who might be Batman fanatics or comic book nerds as I was, young Bruce Wayne at about age 12 saw his parents murdered before his own eyes. At that moment, he sacrificed his childhood and swore that he would get the guy who did it. Swore he'd get all bad guys. He made a commitment that he would honor for the rest of his life, even though he had to walk through hell for the rest of his life to do so. Well, my Bruce Wayne moment came on a cold night in January 1966. My parents were safe upstairs in the kitchen, and I was downstairs in the den watching the debut of the Batman TV show. I was simultaneously thrilled and horrified by what I saw on TV. I mean, I was thrilled that it was the first TV series since George Reeves' Adventures of Superman about a superhero. It was in color, the car was cool, but I was horrified that the whole world was laughing at Batman. That just killed me. I made my little vow that somehow, someday, some way, I would show the world what the true Batman, the 1939 creature of the night, stalking criminals in the shadows, was really like.
Who was that little boy watching Adam West that one night, horrified that the world was laughing at our Cape Crusader? Well, despite my slight mockery and denigration towards film producers earlier, I'm going to gush about one for a second. While the nature of the job of film producer is centered around money, and that doesn't de facto eliminate the innate creativity required to be a great producer. Michael Uslan, I hope I'm pronouncing your last name correctly, is one of, if not the most important key figures in Batman cinema, and why we have as many Dark Knight pictures as we have today. Michael is a fan, was a fan, has always been a fan. But he also recognizes raw talent when he sees it and puts faith and a whole lot of money behind them. Let's get acquainted with the fan first.
I was the ultimate comic book fanboy. I collected, read, and devoured comics. My mom said I learned to read from comics before I was 4. By the time I graduated high school, I had a collection of over 30,000 comic books dating back to 1936. My poor dad, when we moved into our house, never once got his car into the garage, but he supported my interest in reading and built wall-to-wall to floor-to-ceiling shelves for my comic book collection. And as soon as I filled the shelves up, we sold the entire floor of the garage. So that defined me, and I was lucky. I grew up in the 50s and 60s. In the mid-50s, there was an attack on comic books. A psychiatrist claimed that comic books were the reason for the post-World War II rise in juvenile delinquency, and that any kid who read a comic book would become a juvenile delinquent, if not worse. Many of my friends' parents burned their collections and would not allow them to bring comics into the house. So I was lucky because my mom said if I promised to read books, newspapers, and magazines as well as comics and kept them neat, I could keep them. That was the best deal I ever had in my life.
There's a lot to unpack here, but the most important part is that element of childhood literacy you retain from being a comic book fan. For a lot of people, comics are that gateway drug. I believe it was Stan Lee who said that if you almost littered these comics with these bigger words respecting the intelligence of a child, that comic books could be that gateway to almost academic literature.
I don't know anybody who reads comics who doesn't read books. Because if you develop a facility at reading, you'll read anything. And speaking of that, this is another thing I've lectured about a lot when I've gone to high schools and reading classes. There is nothing better than a comic book to help students learn to read. Because today we're living in an age where kids don't read as much and don't want to read as much and feel they don't have to read as much because they get it all on the screen, whether it's a computer screen or a movie screen or a TV screen or a cell phone screen. But a comic book is the one thing they will read. And I've done this experiment with teachers. You put a TV show on and put a youngster in a chair and put a coffee table between the TV and the chair and put a comic on the table, preferably a Marvel comic. And no matter what the show is, after a few minutes, the kid will reach and take the comic, start flipping through it, and after a while will disregard that and start reading this. Now what happens is children learn to equate pleasure with reading when they read comics. The more comics they read, the more they develop a facility at reading. And the more you become a reader, the more certain it is that you will go on to read other things. I may have mentioned, I used to get a ton of mail all the time from everybody. I received so many letters from parents who said essentially the same things. Stan, I can't understand it. Little Johnny, I could never get him to pick up a book or anything. And I'd see him reading a comic and I'd yell at him, but finally I let him read them. They were the only things he'd read. And now I'm amazed. His grades in school in English were poor. He's now getting good grades in vocabulary and writing and composition. And for some reason, it's since he's been reading the comics. I received more letters like that the kids were doing better in composition and in English after reading comics. And of course, the ones I wrote, I think I was the first one to do this. I didn't limit the vocabulary to young people. I tried to use a college level or above vocabulary. If I wanted to use a word like cataclysmic or misanthropic or whatever, I would use it. And I'd figure three things could happen. The kid would either go to a dictionary and look it up, and that's not the worst thing in the world, or he'd get it by osmosis, by the use in the sentence, or I forget what the third one was, but either one of those two isn't bad.
And I think it's true. I think the true power of comic books is in its versatility as an artistic medium, in that they can be an escape from the mundane, from the trauma of our real lives, but also at the same time help us grow and succeed at being better human beings in the process. The power of comic books is twofold. Escapism, fantasy, because it is a fantasy, but also democratize literacy. Those are loaded terms, and surely so big they could be videos of their own, but they are so key to what I'm talking about in this video. Michael Uslan was instrumental in making Batman a film intellectual property and general film giant, and that's when we got Batman, directed by Tim Burton. For a time, Batmania struck again. Batman had become a blockbuster hit that took the world by storm. And that really meant something since the internet was only in its infancy, so the movie couldn't rely on that kind of mass promotion that we're so used to today. But it also was such a hit in terms of the Jaws phenomenon of the blockbuster at the time. This besides Superman the movie, was the first time a superhero film, a comic book film, had become a blockbuster hit.
Batman's become hip and cool, and people can come out of the closet and admit that they read Batman and that comics are in vogue now.
Batman 89 succeeded because of many things, like extensive word-of-mouth praise, despite the public's overwhelming anxiety over the casting of funny guy Michael Keaton as the Dark Knight, as well as Tim Burton delivering on a gothic stylized fantasy, while also ultimately being a crowd pleaser all the same. But then Batman Returns came out. Me personally, I quite love Batman Returns, murderous Batman aside. This is a really gorgeous movie visually, really fun cast, and a lot of great set pieces, and most of all, it's full Burton. Unlike Batman 89, which was definitely a lot more measured in its approach, whether you like full Burton or not, you gotta respect the unique vision here. Also, it's a pretty fun Christmas movie, if I do say myself. Well, it turns out, the vote was cast and the court of public opinion said a whopping no. A Burton movie starring Batman. As it always is with stuff like this, the moral panic strikes. You can't sell toys for a movie, or Penguin bites a guy's nose off and Catwoman gets reanimated by a horde of cats on a bloody Gotham street. People may be more in favor of Returns these days, and Michael Keaton Batman in general, but the parents and the kids were not having it with this grotesque look at the sad little monsters in Gotham City. Movies are made to make money, lest we forget. And what did our beloved studio and producers do in response? Nothing like good old focus groups. Why, no, we'll never have such an intense audience outcry that we'll have to do this again, will we? Well, after licking their wounds for a while, good old Warner decided that Batman needed to lighten up and be a property for kids again. So, who better to do it than Joel Schumacher? Okay, these days my confusion would seem unwarranted to you because he made the silly willy bing bang pow rubber nipple fest. But let's take a look at what good old Joel Schumacher made before Batman Forever.
out, won't give in. This is our crime, this is our sin. But I still believe through the pain, through the grief, through the light, through the storms, through the cries, through the wars.
Joel Schumacher was popular for making dark and gritty city dramas dripping with neon and soundtracked by sax players. I'm a huge fan of Joel, and it pains me every day that when people hear the name of Joel Schumacher, they don't see him for the brilliant director and genuine artist that he truly was. So I don't want to hear any of that Joel Schumacher sucks because he put nipples on the Batsuit Bowl. If you like those Joker movies so much, go watch a better movie in Falling Down and get back to me. Well, Joel made Batman Forever, which was explicitly designed to be as far away from Burton as possible. But I think in an interesting way, Schumacher just does something better. Though that's a whole hour-long video I say in of itself. This movie was designed to be toyetic. Yes, the one word that would plague the Batman IP for the rest of time. Like I said earlier, movies are made to make money. And what better way to make money off of superheroes than to make some toys?
Who explodes with more firepower than ever? No question. It's Batman Forever. It's Gotham City's ultimate battle as the Riddler's brain trap drains your brain. But Night Hunter Batman sets his sights on crushing evil every time. And Hydroclaw Robin delivers a devastating left hook. And when Batman soars in the Turbo Batwing, evil is blasted from the sky and battered with an explosive surprise. Who's the ultimate answer to crime? No question. It's Batman Forever. Figures and vehicles sold separately.
Batman Forever made roughly $330 million in the box office, not nearly as much as Batman '89 made, but a lot more than Returns did. So it was considered a success, so they went for more Schumacher Batman, and decided the lesson to learn was what worked best was the absurdity, not the intense drama or great understanding of Batman's trauma. So Batman and Robin was made more absurd than its predecessor. Now, I'm not going to scream studio interference, even though it's definitely a component, but a lesson to learn here is Warner Brothers doesn't tend to learn the right lessons from box office successes and losses, and tends to go all in on the wrong ideas. Sound familiar? Well, Batman and Robin flopped, so welcome to no Batman movies. What killed the Batman franchise?
The Ice Age!
Okay, I lied. The best Batman movies came out in this period, but no one watched them, so you suck. Between 1997 and 2005, the only Batman cinema to be found was in Batman animation. And for some reason, you guys have this thing about animation that you can't get over, so we'll move past these masterpieces, I guess. What is that I hear? Huh, I wonder what that's about. Well, back to the video. Skipped some cartoon movies that nobody cares about, and we're at 2005. Well, now we have the Nolan Batman films, which took the world by storm, and in a lot of ways catapulted Nolan to general audience fame after making movies like The Prestige and Memento, giving him the chance to make these films. As much as I want to rant about my complicated feelings with these films, I'm going to keep it short. Many different studios, following the success of the Dark Knight trilogy, decided what we really needed was a surge of dark and gritty affair instead of, I don't know, uniquely creative, artist-driven projects with a love for the source material. Crazy idea, I know. Thank you, Hollywood producers, for having just as much media literacy as the people who talk about movies on Twitter. Well, in between now and then, we have only had one Batman movie, and that is The Batman. I will get to that, but before we stop there, I can't neglect Ben Affleck, or I might be murdered.
What's that ominous glow in the distance?
While Ben never got his own Batman movie per se, not for lack of trying, he's most definitely a very important piece of Batman cinema history, especially considering how polarizing this rendition of The Dark Knight has been. I definitely feel like Ben Affleck's Batman really felt like the first live action Batman to be truly impacted by social media rallying, whether it's in favor or against. You know, I could be wrong, but that's the vibe I got during the time he was Batman, like most affected by social media. This is not a Batman ranking video, so I'm not touching that. I'm not touching that at all. But it's important to note the impact of this interpretation in two different ways. The first time a live-action Batman has ever met Superman on the big screen, and really been a part of a larger sci-fi universe like the comics. Say what you will about Zack Snyder, but that is, at the very least, unprecedented. Well, the DCU came and went. There was a lot of Hamada and Whedon ridiculousness. And then there was the absolutely absurd Warner Discovery merger where I met my arch nemesis, an overall gutter trash person, David Zaslav. And with that, the question remains, is this who Batman is? Who is Batman? That is the question that I've been trying to ask my whole life. Not in the way that I don't know who Bruce Wayne is under the mask, but the question of what makes Batman Batman, and is there some definitive interpretation from which all of them spring? Like, is there a prime version of Batman that like everything comes from? Is there truly a source to all of this, or is Batman as a character a living, breathing, changing thing that we really can't nail down to any discernible idea? Is Batman a soldier? Is he a lover? Is he a fighter?
No, because if you're a lover, you gotta be a fighter.
How so?
Because if you don't fight for your love, what kind of love do you have? No, I'm kidding.
Go away, John Wick. Batman real?
Adults struggle desperately with fiction, demanding constantly that it conform to the rules of everyday life. Adults foolishly demand to know how Superman can possibly fly, or how Batman can possibly run a multi-billion-dollar business empire during the day and fight crime at night, when the answer is obvious even to the smallest child, because it's not real.
We keep trying to fit this Dark Knight Avenger, this Cape Crusader, into this box of ours. We need to make him make sense because Batman is nonsense. As adults, some of us fans are so deathly afraid of what we loved as kids being considered childish. So we latch on to dark and gritty, gruesome stories that feel adult in our eyes. And then you make Batman fit into that box so you don't feel childish, so you don't feel as if you're not acting your age. You failed Batman. You're insecure and you're injecting those insecurities into the Dark Knight stories you're telling, and it shows. Let's journey with the Batmen who aren't afraid to be both for kids and adults.
It's pretty second nature, but Batman, he's a complicated guy. And that voice can't be just a quirky voice that you as an actor put on. It's a state of mind that you have to get into, because that voice comes from such a deep well of pain. If you don't really do it genuinely, it sounds artificial. It sounds like you're just putting on a funny voice. You really need to invest it with a lot of emotion and a lot of backstory. At least that's what I found. Or maybe that's just me. After all, I'm an actor and I come from a pretty serious theater background. So maybe I'm just reading all that into it.
Remember those animated Batman tales that you didn't care about because, well, that's just kids stuff. Well, you know, it's not like animation is an art form or something. Well, here they are. I firmly believe we have no greater Batman stories outside of the comics than those in animation. So let's give credit where it's due. I think that animated Batman, whether it's Batman the Animated Series, The Batman, Brave and the Bold, Beyond, or even Beware, they all strike this wonderful balance of the fantastic and the real. You never question the absurdity of it all because the emotions are so hard and real. We never question the technology of the Batmobile or how Batman glides that high because we understand his past, his loss, and how this past pain informs his hopeful future. The story of Batman ultimately is the ultimate hero tale. It's a man with no special abilities except for...
But you're different. You don't have any special powers.
Oh, I have one, Johnny. I never give up.
I think the power of a truly absurd Batman world is that the larger-than-life world accentuates a Batman who will never give up on protecting everyone in it because he can never let anyone else suffer what he's suffered. The concept of Batman is inherently absurd. That we know. But it's okay for us to still believe in and cherish the stories of a grown man wearing tights and fighting Joker and Two-Face. Just because it's absurd doesn't mean it isn't good. In fact, it makes it better because the world we live in is inherently absurd, but in all the wrong ways. The concept of Batman demands the belief of a child. Children don't question why Batman is fighting Darkseid here, or why he's wearing underwear on the outside. They just understand without question that this is who Batman is. Can you do that? Can you be like a child again? Is it impossible to revisit that bedroom filled with wall-to-wall nerd memorabilia? Is it impossible to taste those cereal bowls again, and that CRTV buzzing more intensely and longer than a bumblebee? Can you revisit that cool morn on a Saturday morning, watching cartoons on the couch hidden under a pile of blankets? Grab your blankets, make a bowl of cereal, turn on the TV, and let's talk Batman. This is where you storm my house and try to kill me, right? This isn't a Reeves hate video. In fact, this is a Reeves love video, just in a way some people might not be comfortable with. I love the Batman 22. I think it's the closest we've gotten to a true blue Batman movie in live action. And it's a really great film. I rewatch constantly, but... Not you, Matt. Can I call you Matt? I've loved your work ever since I saw Cloverfield and Lost to an extent. You are a brilliant filmmaker and definitely a big inspiration to me. I don't know if you're watching this video on an under 400 subs YouTube channel, But for right now, I just want to talk directly to you. I want you to succeed, and I'm sure you will, with or without me, because you are immensely talented. Wherever you go with this Batman, I will be right there, watching those movies. I firmly believe that it's better for a filmmaker to go his own way and make a film he's proud of over a film approved by a committee of fans who have not an ounce of creative intent. But at the end of the day, I can't stop thinking about that article.
What was important to me was to find a way to take these pop icons, these mythical characters that everybody knows, and translate it so that Gotham feels like a place in our world. We might push to the edge of the fantastical, but we will never go into full fantastical. It's meant to feel quite grounded. It doesn't mean that you won't see characters that people love. That's exactly what we want to do. Gentleman Ghost is probably pushed a bit too far for us to be able to find a way to do. But there's a fun way to think about how we would take characters that might push over into the bit of a fantastical and find a way to make sense of that.
Now, I'm not going to be one of those guys saying you hate comics or you haven't read them, because it's so clear you have a passion for the comics. So I am making this video out of love for the comics, your film, and the potential future of all of that. I understand the grounding part, but the part that gets me going and makes me question the rationale of all of this is the desperate need to make all of this realistic and grounded in the sense of happening in the real world. I like that in the sense of politics and corruption of the Batman 22. But what I don't understand is why we have to stop and plant Batman in this spot where he's only an urban crime fighter fighting mob bosses. I think you're limiting the character in that way. I'm not saying any of this to limit you, the filmmaker, but because I believe in this foundation you've already established of a Bruce trying to rebuild the Batman mantle into something brighter, something kinder, something full of hope. And who better to learn from than the Bright Knight?
Not exactly how I was expecting to spend my Christmas Eve.
There was a man from Gotham in the Batmobile he rode, defending the defenseless. It's to him I sing this ode. With his hammers of justice, he struck down every foe.